All right, commissioners, I'm going to start the finance meeting. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
Romano, adopt the agenda.
So move, Carabelli.
Moved by Romano, supported by Carabelli. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? If you are on the phone, hit *6. Does anyone wish to be heard? Anyone wish to be heard? All right, seeing none, I'll close public participation. Presentations, 2021 Executive Recommended Budget. Director Smeagol.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
So I am hoping to be able to share my screen. I see Courtney is presenting. Can I share my screen?
Yes, if you just, I'm no longer presenting.
There we go.
Courtney, yep.
Gotcha.
If your presentation,
Can everyone see a pardon?
we see you. If your presentation is you, we see you. Oh, wait, it's coming up now.
It's coming up now. It should be a PowerPoint presentation. You
Got
let
it.
me know when it's everything
up.
ready to roll?
Yep.
Okay. So good news about the 2021 budget. As you may have noticed as looking through the budget document we distributed last week, the budget is balanced for the next 3 years. And I have some really good news to share about 2020, and I'll talk about that a little bit before I get into 2021. But a brief message of 2021 now. As you know, we entered the budget cycle looking at a fairly significant deficit of about $13 million. We asked all departments to trim their budgets by 5% of their controllable expenses. And that was just shy of $10 million. And our thought at the time was we would take, some savings from 2020 and supplement that, the difference between the deficit we were looking at and the $10 million that we are asking the departments to trim. And I'm happy to say that all the departments pitched in and went a long way toward helping the general fund reduce that budget and actually put it in a surplus position. And you'll see that what that really meant to most departments was holding vacant positions open for next year. So you may have noticed through the information that we have over 100 positions that are either being held vacant or eliminated, or in the case of the clerk's office, transferring 2 positions to a grant-funded a fee-based operation in concealed pistol licenses. So I want to thank every department head and elected official for participating in the budget reductions. So I'll leave my 2021 comments at that for right now. I've been updating the board as we've gone through various meetings this summer about financial results in the general fund for 2020 and in the wake of the COVID pandemic. And we continue to realize budgetary savings in almost all areas in county government. We are losing some revenue. So here on slide 2, I've kind of given some highlights of interest or excuse me, revenues that are being impacted negatively by COVID, and it's all your fee-based revenues. We've mentioned it before. Real estate transfer tax, revenue sharing, which is sort of odd this year. As you know, the state cut it, but they gave us 150% of that amount in the form of CARES dollars that we can use in whatever way we want, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Commissions at the jail on commissary and payphones are down because of the reduction in the jail count. However, we have some increases. Recording fees are doing quite well in the low interest rate environment that is out there. Liquor tax seems to be doing quite well, and we received about a $3.8 million surplus PPT reimbursement from fiscal year 19, which will go a long way to shore up the budget for 2020. So overall, we're looking at this point at revenues coming in under budget about $2.6 million. I've also mentioned during the course of various meetings that we're reducing or seeing reductions in operating expenses in the general fund as well. Those 100 positions that I mentioned previously are vacant today. There's about 62 of them in the general fund. Those vacant positions are resulting in significant personnel savings to the tune of about 7% of budget in 2020, based on our current projections. Of course, as you realize, we have a large portion of our workforce that is working remote, resulting in savings in utilities. We're not traveling, mileage, and various other expenses across the board. The courts until recently were closed for jury trials, so jury fee expenses down, for example. I will see if I jumped ahead of myself. On page 4, of course, the population at the jail was in the 300 range for much of the year. I think it's up around 500 as of a couple weeks ago when I spoke with the sheriff. That's about, the 300 range is about 33% of where it was in 2019. So we're seeing reductions in overtime, savings in prisoner transportation, savings in overtime at the hospital because there's not as many prisoners going to the hospital, savings in prisoner meals and jail medical, for example. So what we're seeing is, and a lot can happen, of course, in the fourth quarter. We're seeing expense savings around $14 million for the year. So really what we're looking at is, all else being equal, without any additional infusion of CARES money, is a surplus for 2020 in the general fund somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million. Could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower. Of course, again, we get some significant revenues in the fourth quarter of the year. We get 2 liquor tax distribution or 2 revenue sharing distributions. Again, the state has indicated that we will remain whole in 2021 compared to 2020. We get a 3rd liquor tax distribution, and we get our base, I call it the base PPT reimbursement, the essential services tax. So a lot of those things happen in October and November. So we'll see where we land with revenue, in November. But right now, we're looking at about a $12 million surplus in the general fund, all else being equal. So I mentioned the CARES Act earlier, and one thing that the Treasury has gone back and forth on and has now landed back to where they were in July relative to allowable uses is we can use CARES money to fund public health and public safety payroll. So I mentioned earlier that the August revenue sharing distribution was not made. That's about $4.1 million. What we did receive was $6.2 million of CARES money. So our intention is to use that, the CARES money, to supplement or replace basically the revenue sharing. In addition to that, we've gone through our CARES spending plan and we've identified about $18 million of additional monies that are available to allocate toward payroll at the sheriff department or the health department. Either or, we're targeting the sheriff department at this point in time. And that's something that the state of Michigan did with their CARES money. They are funding state police payroll as well as Department of Corrections payroll. So they're using their CARES money in a similar manner to augment or basically solve their budget problems for 2020 and 2021. So when you combine the $18 million that we're projecting will be available with the $12 million, you're looking at a surplus in 2020, roughly $30 million, assuming, again, that everything else continues trending the way it has through the first 9 months. We have 2 specific uses for that money that we hope and will be in a position to bring forward to you in more detail later in the year, probably in December, but we'll keep you updated in the meantime, so there's no surprises. And what we would like to do with that, moving on to slide 6, is we would first like to take $14 million or 14 and a half, and we would like to transfer that money in 2020 to the debt service fund. And the purpose for doing that is to set money aside to redeem 2 bond issues early in 2021. So we have 5 total issues outstanding, and you'll see a maturity schedule later in the presentation. And 3 of those are from 2012 or 2014. There's 2 from 2012, 1 from 2014. They're both refunding issues. 2 of those can be refunded or redeemed early in 2021. The third one was related to the youth home in Martha Teaberry renovations. We've refunded bonds in 2014. Those are not callable, so to speak, but they mature in 2022. What that will do is remove $14 million of debt from the books, which is a good thing. And over the course of the next 5 years, save about $450,000 in interest costs. So that's proposal number 1. Proposal number 2 would be to transfer just shy of $11 million, 10.8, to the capital improvement fund in 2020 to fund projects primarily earmarked in 2022 and 23. But we could use that money, of course, for unforeseen events, such like repairs at the jail. We don't know what's going on or what will happen in the future with jail. So that money would be in the capital improvement fund and, again, set aside for future capital projects. What those 2 initiatives will do is then relieve general fund contributions in 2021, 22, and 23, 24, and 25, actually, for debt service and contributions to the capital improvement fund. So again, taking savings from this year, setting aside for the future year, taking the volatility out of the general fund budget, so you don't have losses and gains and things of that nature. The credit agencies, love to see consistency in your budget and not, large spikes from year to year. So again, adding consistency, taking volatility out of the budget. Those 2 initiatives would then still leave, after those 2 initiatives, I apologize, there would still be about a $4.9 million surplus in the general fund for 2020. We could set that money aside. We could earmark it for future COVID expenses, which we've talked about internally. And that would then result in a fund balance of about just over 24% of expenditures at the end of the year. Again, a healthy fund balance. We have some money we could earmark for COVID. We think these two proposals are financially sound, fiscally responsible things to do with basically unanticipated savings in 2020 as a result of the pandemic, curiously enough as it may seem. So how do those things impact the budget? You'll see in the general fund very positively. Slide 7 gives you an overview of the budget in total, and it's about $857 million. It's an increase of just over 5% from 2020. And you'll see in a slide or two, primarily as a result of increases in state and federal funding for the road department, the health department, and mental health services, as well as the budget shows a big increase in debt service in the debt service fund, assuming that the proposal to redeem the bonds early is approved by the board. The general fund budget went down about 1.2%, primarily as a result of positions being held vacant and unfunded, as I mentioned previously. We've built in a 2% property tax increase. Property taxes have been increasing steadily, property values, I should say. A little over 4% increases the last couple of years, but we're seeing a slowdown in the economy. We're seeing lower inflation. New housing starts are about 50% of what they were a year ago for the entire year. So we had built a reduction down to the 2% level into the budget a year ago, assuming that on the wave of the 10-year economic gains, I guess, if you will, or the bull market, that there would be a natural slowdown in the economy anyway. So we built a 2% wage or property tax increase. We have 2% wage increases pursuant to our collective bargaining agreements. Again, we have over 100 positions that are being held vacant across all funds. There's about 62 in the general fund, and the remainder are in grant funds. A good portion of those are actually in the child care fund, because, as you know, the counts at the youth home are low. So we've also been able to build in a $2 million contingency for COVID expenses. That could be for PPE or any number of things that are unforeseen. As you know, the CARES funding at this point is scheduled to lapse or go away more or less at the end of this year. So we put a $2 million contingency aside for COVID-related expenses. You'll see that as a separate line item in the appropriations area. We've also, I don't have it on this slide, we've also built in about $1.6 million projected savings for healthcare credits that we're going to give back to the departments in 2021 as a result of savings in our healthcare costs or spend in 2020. I didn't mention that previously, but one of the other things that's happening as a result of COVID is, especially early on, folks weren't going to the doctor, they weren't having elective procedures done, and we've seen about maybe 12 to 15% decrease through about the middle of the summer, at least, in our self-insured claims. So we've built in some credits for next year for that as well. So we've done all this, and we've done it with no layoffs. We've done it with surpluses in the next 3 years, and we are being able to do it and proposing to be able to take some debt off our books and basically pre-fund capital projects. So we think all those things are good things, and hope that the board will agree with us and approve our proposals that we intend, again, on bringing forward probably in December.
Okay, can I get a motion to receive and file the presentation and the proposed budget?
So move Carabelli.
Second, Hall.
Okay, we have
Support.
we have motion and support. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for Steve. First, thank you for the presentation, Steve. Excellent work. Also, I like the idea of prepaying off some of the bonds. And you mentioned that some of the prepayment of the bond money would be put into the capital improvement fund. And then another smaller amount would be, I guess, left in the fund balance of the general fund. Why not just put the whole thing into the fund balance and then draw from the fund balance if we need it for capital improvements instead of dedicating it into the capital improvement fund?
What I like about setting that money aside in separate funds is it's in separate funds that are dedicated for a specific purpose. So it removes that funding from the general fund. It would
Right,
be
but we
earmarked
don't-
that way. It's clearly earmarked in two different funds. That,
Right, but you're not projecting putting all the money into the capital improvement fund specifically dedicated to specific projects. I know some of it is because a good chunk of it is for some specific projects that we're intending to do in the next couple of years. But another chunk of it is just being put in there, not dedicated to a specific project. Isn't that basically like putting it in the general fund?
in a way, Commissioner, but if we left it in the fund balance of the general fund, then when we transferred it to the capital improvement fund, then you have transfers happening in future years, and those years then show essentially losses or deficits for those particular years. What this does is retains and maintains surpluses in all 3 years versus a large, so say we left that $10 million in the fund balance of the general fund. So now the surplus is not 5 million, it's 15 million. But in 2022, then you have a loss of $10 million, essentially. Similar thing with the debt service. So the debt service for 2021, if we did nothing on those issues, would be about $4.5 million. So again, we could leave it in the general fund in 2020, and then you have a budget deficit in 2021 of $4.5 million versus a $643,000 surplus.
Steve, can I
today.
Interject for just a second? Commissioner Gillette, Director Smeagol and I had a long conversation about this. We know we have some repairs coming down the road that could potentially put us in put a strain on the budget. And the idea behind this was safeguarding the money so that it doesn't end up getting used, and we have those budget. It's a protection for the budget in the future so that we can do the repairs and not put ourselves in a position. You know how a lot of times when we get the capital outlay, we look 5 years out and the numbers are down and they always end up creeping up. We know that happens, and in this way, as those creep up because of repairs, we've got money to cover it. So it's not a surprise every year. It's sort of a protection against future budgets is the way that I viewed it. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with that, Commissioner Kleinfeld. And I mentioned earlier, it takes the volatility out of the budget. And the credit agencies really like that. We are purposely, intentionally, thoughtfully setting money aside for two specific purposes, and as Commissioner Kleinfeld correctly pointed out, we're protecting the budget basically in future years.
Okay, let me just, I guess, note that while we are providing stability in the capital improvement fund, we're also, I guess, not locking in because we can always take it back out. but we are dedicating it toward those capital improvement projects. And if for some reason we experience a deepening recession, we then would have to make the choice of taking out a capital improvement to potentially fund social service projects or other elements of the budget that might take a hit if a recession, happens or deepens, depending on if you interpret this as a recession currently or not. So in other words, we're dedicating that money to capital improvement projects in the future instead of holding on to the flexibility of maybe needing it for other purposes if indeed we experience a recession. I grant, Steve, I don't think there's anything that would stop us if that happened from taking it out of capital improvement fund and putting it into, whatever we needed, veteran services or other social services. We could still move it in future years. So it's really sort of like an intention more than it is a locked in place dedication. Is that correct?
Relative to the capital improvement fund, yes. So that money obviously would be in a capital projects fund. If something happened and we went into a deep recession or something, we could then pull that money back and spend it on whatever we needed to spend it on.
Okay.
And the debt service, once it's in the debt service fund, we would come to the board with a request to approve the redemption of the 2 bond issues, and then that money would be gone. But then,
right.
Again, once that money's gone, we're still, debt is the debt. So regardless of whether we're in a recession or not, the debt service is there. We can't.
Right.
We can't.
I'm not talking about. Right. I'm not talking about the money that we're using to pay off some of the bonds early. I'm talking about the money that we would be putting in the capital improvement fund in addition to paying off those bonds early.
Correct. And the capital improvement fund money would be there to use and pull back and use for non-capital projects. If you want to, I don't know, that's really not the best English probably, but I think you know what I'm saying. But it's there also in case we don't fall into a deep recession, and if our budget projections hold true, because again, what we did in 22 and 23 is we lowered the property tax assumption to 1% for each of those years. So, we've already tightened our belt on one of our most significant revenue source in the general fund. So again, it's there, but it does take volatility out, at least today. And I think that's a sound thing to do. So I'll continue to push for that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that answer, Steve. Thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Ha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, first let me say this budget, I believe, would be a shock to most of us. It wasn't what we were anticipating in the earlier part of this year with the COVID crisis taking place. So I have to agree with your assessment. If it's not good news, it's great news. But I want to follow on the capital improvement fund. One of the ways, if I recall correctly, in 2019, that we balanced the budget and met the surplus requirements is we postponed some capital improvement projects until 2020. And if I heard you correctly, we're going to be moving funds, but possibly, if not factually, postponing projects until 22, 23. Are the same priorities that we used in 2019 going to be used for the projects moving forward to 22, 23? One question. And second, on the issue of the capability of moving capital improvement project funds, that's always our prerogative to do that, to make the decision whether or not A is more important then possibly social service programs for B. So are we in fact moving the 019 projects to the 2022-2023 budget, or are these something that would be considered different and new?
There are primarily two projects, Commissioner, that money is not specifically earmarked for, but is sufficient in dollars to cover. And we've continued to push those projects off, and they're the renovation of the Macomb building to enable the health department to vacate the building they're in today and move into the space that's being vacated at the end of the year by the state of Michigan, and renovations at the Southeast Health Building in St. Clair Shores. Those projects have been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. As you look at the capital plan for the next 5 years, there's about $8.9 million of projects on that plan for 2020. About half of that money, maybe not quite half, is repairs and renovations at the boathouse for the Marine Patrol. That building was built, I believe, in the mid-1970s. The high water level has resulted in flooding the last year or two. New boats are of a different configuration than the old boats. So there's issues fitting the boats into the boat wells, so on and so forth. So that's about a $3.7 million project. I think you've seen the design or approved contracts for the design work on that already previously this year. But to answer your main question, Commissioner, those two projects for the health department have been pushed back. They've probably been on the capital plan for 4, 5, 6 years. And we continue to push them back. And at some point in time, some of that equipment will start to break down for sure. I believe there's some rooftop units at the current health department building at the service center that are from the 60s. So, have I answered your question, I guess?
Yes, thank you. And I'm sure our chair of the community health would certainly support those renovations taking place. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Steve, what is the budget increase, the actual budget increase from last year's budget or to the current or to the new budget?
Are you looking at all funds? You want all funds or just in general? All funds, 5%, just over 5%. That's we'll get to that slide in a minute. It's about 5.1. Just so call it 5.
What about our general fund?
Minus 1.2.
All right, that's better. What is it going? What are the projections going forward? I mean, what about the following year for the general fund?
Hard to tell on the kind of the special revenue funds. The general fund is essentially have wage increases built in and the capital projects, but I think all the other operating accounts are pretty much being held steady. You'll see, I think there's a $600,000 surplus in 2021, $350,000 in 22, and maybe just under $100,000 in 23. But again, in 22 and 23, we've lowered our property tax assumption as well, so that's resulting in lower revenues and then therefore lower surpluses.
The general fund budget's good because we have better opportunities to control those numbers. The all funds though bumps up to over 5%, and that's not a good number in my mind.
Well, Commissioner, those are offset. That's the expense budget. So those budgets are offset by increases in state and federal funds. So you'll see significant monies in the road department, which about 80% of that's funded by outside sources. There's a significant increase also in community mental health services and health grants. So the health department's getting some, fairly significant money for COVID related grants. So it's not necessarily resulting in general fund support of those programs. It's state and federal monies, or in the case of the roads, I believe, dipping into some of their fund balance as well. That, and again, I've said this in prior years, special, fund balances and special revenue funds are there to be spent. So it's not necessarily, in my opinion, a bad thing that you're spending down fund balances that were generated through grant monies.
Thank you for that reminder. What percentage of our budget, in this budget you're presenting, has been supported by COVID, by federal aid for COVID expenses? $175 million came into the county's budget.
Yeah, we have a significant amount this year. I know there's about, I want to say, $4 million in the health department, but some of that money might expire at the end of this year, but it's their fiscal year 2021. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I can get it for you, Commissioner.
Yeah, just be curious, because that will be this is a one-time windfall, right? Because of the money that's coming from the federal government, right? So like backfilling the sheriff's budget.
Right, exactly. So that's our, it's an unanticipated increase in revenues, and if you want to portray it as a windfall, that's not an unfair assessment, and we want to take advantage of that. Something like this happens once every 100 years or whatever. So
yeah, for sure.
we want
to
take advantage of it now to pay down debt, put money aside for. Yeah,
we're not going to return the money.
So we certainly don't want to return the money.
Okay. And then the capital projects were pretty much answered by Commissioner Hall's question. So I thank you, Steve, for the information. And that's all, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Steve.
Thank you. Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Steve, thanks for the presentation. Good question so far. A real simple question I have for you in the very beginning. I think you stated that revenue sharing was going to be 4.1, but they cut that and we got like 6.1 instead through the CARES thing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's a little unsettling to me, being that we got $2 million more than what technically they were going to give us, and CARES money obviously is going to disappear. And with all the extra funds and everything else, we look good now and for most of next year. But after that, revenue sharing goes back to where it was. Is that not a little concerning to you?
Not necessarily, Commissioner, because we're utilizing the additional $2 million to, carry out these proposals to redeem the debt and put the capital projects money aside. So the state, we're at about 17.2 million in a normal year in terms of revenue sharing, and the state, they're experiencing sort of unforeseen revenue trends as well in a positive direction relative to income tax collections and sales tax collections in the midst of the pandemic. So at this point, they've said, well, for at least for 2021, your revenue sharing is equal to what it was in 2020 before I call it the revenue sharing replacement, but it's about 17.2 million. Of course, if we end up with a recession or something going into 2022, they could cut it again, or cut it. I shouldn't say again, because it hasn't been cut for, a while on a straight cut, put it that way. This whole revenue sharing, replacing money with CARES, that's an odd situation. So I'm not too concerned about it. I think, again, we take advantage of, sort of a once in a lifetime event for most of us, and do some very, well thought out things with that money.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just real quick, Steve, if we used it for expenses that become yearly expenses, then we would be in trouble. But if we use it for one-time expenses, which is what you're proposing, it doesn't take us down that road. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, nice presentation. Just a couple questions here, Steve. When you say that we're going to relieve contributions for capital fund by coming up with, I'm trying to look for the numbers that I wrote in here. 14 and a half, was it 14? How much? $11 million of capital improvements. And you're leaving that contribution for capital fund for 21, 22, 23, and 24. Again, piggybacking somewhat what Mr. Carabelli and Mr. Drollet mentioned, commissioners, isn't it looking in the foreseeable future for something that we all believe this economy is going to blow? If it doesn't blow this year, it's going to blow next year. We've all seen it. I shouldn't say we all seen it, but I've seen it happen 3 or 4 times because of my age, and I think it's going to happen again. What's the chances of taking that $4 million surplus for the 2020 COVID and just sticking it in the general fund, allowing the credit agencies to see that if in fact we needed to bond out again, looking at that general fund balance, wouldn't that give us a better credit rating? And I'm asking because I don't know.
Not necessarily, Commissioner. The credit agencies will look at not only the general fund budget, but the capital improvement fund balance as well. I'm sorry, let me back up. I misspoke. They'll look at the fund balance in the general fund. They look at the fund balance in the delinquent tax revolving fund, and they would look at the fund balance in any other funds like the capital improvement fund that are not restricted by law for some other purpose. So they would combine those together, and we would make sure to point out to them in any kind of rating presentation that we have those 3 pools of money to consider one fund balance for rating purposes.
So we're covered, in other words, in case there was a situation that come up, we do have the money. Well, so the other question would be that $4.9 million you're in the surplus for the COVID. Again, was there other places that discussion was made as to where else could we use it instead of just holding on to it, 4.9 surplus for 2020 COVID? What if in fact we didn't need it? Was there discussion made between people of where else could it be put in use? Or where else could
no, we have not had those
where
discussions.
Else could be put?
Yeah, we haven't had those commissions or discussions, Commissioner. What it is, it would go in, and we could use it for other purposes as well. But we know that, it doesn't necessarily appear that COVID's going away anytime soon. And we have some PPE needs, I think, that we believe will flow into 2021. And it's nice to have that money aside, but it's there for other things as well. But I don't know if that answers your question sufficiently.
It did. It's used for other things as well, and that's what I wanted to hear. Soon, Steve, how soon is this money to be allocated to the different departments or set aside for the different departments? Are we talking at the end of this year? Are we talking after the election? When is this going to happen?
Are you talking about the capital improvement money and the money for all the debt service?
Yeah, well, all the money that we have in surplus.
In my mind, as we progress through October and November, we will have a much better idea, of course, if these financial trends are continuing and whether we'll have sufficient money available to carry out these 2 initiatives that we're talking about. We would then bring proposals to the board in December, and that's because we want to wait as late as we can so we have better numbers. And as I mentioned earlier, I will keep the board apprised as we move through October and November if the numbers I'm talking about today are still looking like they're going to land in those spots by the end of the year. In terms of appropriating the remainder of the budget, that's will depend on how the budget hearings go and the board schedule. The board, the budget doesn't have to be appropriated until the end of the year. I think in the past couple of years, it's, been targeted at least in the November time range. I think last year we got into some discussions about how to balance the budget, so that ended up not being appropriated or approved or adopted until December. So,
so the earliest we're talking, Steve, is probably mid or late November. Is that correct?
That's my interpretation. That would be my expectation. Okay. I don't know if Chairwoman Kleinfeld
or sooner, Steve.
Pardon?
Yeah, I think Joe, he's looking at when it has to do with when we approve the budget, because he just said, I don't know what Chairwoman Kleinfeld is thinking. So it really has to do with when we approve all of it, I think.
Okay, well, we're moving forward. We're already into October, so I think we're safe to say sometime in November. That's all I have. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And let me say this. The 2021 budget could be approved in November, and then these other two proposals would be amendments to the 2020 budget, and that could still happen in December. So
got it.
Just a clarification.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other speakers. So we have a motion in support. Please vote.
That motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is department recommendations. We've got purchase of military service time. Is there a motion for Daniel DeCourt, 6 months? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Romano.
Moved by Carabelli, supported by Romano. Hold on just a second. Okay, I don't see any speakers. Please vote.
That motion passes 10-0.
Okay, next we have a bypass item for bond counsel. You guys didn't end up dealing with this at noon, correct? There was some discussion about whether or not to deal with this or just to leave it as a bypass.
Commissioner, this is Patty. It was not dealt with at the 12 p.m. full board.
Okay, thank you. So this is a motion to receive and file. Is there a motion?
Support, Drollet.
Moved by Gillette. Is there support?
Carabelli.
Support by Carabelli. Please vote.
Oh, Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Oh, I apologize, Commissioner Hall. I apologize. Go ahead.
Thank you. Why is this a bypass item? I mean, attorneys usually don't get paid in any particular fast order anyways. So can somebody explain why?
Harold,
I can, Commissioner, or Bob, do you want to take it, Commissioner Smith?
Go ahead, Steve. I didn't know you were still there.
Yeah, so Commissioner Hall, this came up last week or maybe the end of the week before, when in consultation with the underwriters and our financial advisors, the decision was made to open up the refunding issue to international investors, and there was additional work that was required on the part of bond counsel. And the sale is scheduled to take place on Thursday of this week. The pre-sale is tomorrow. So we were just trying to make sure that we had an amended contract approved so they could continue their work relative to the bond sale.
There was a timing issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair Smith.
No, that's what I was going to bring up. So we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Smith. I don't see any other speakers. Please vote.
That motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. Okay, so item C is waived by Public Service Committee Chair, full board approval requested, and the full board approval is being requested right now, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve. It's a contract, MDOT contract, reconstruction and widening a 23-mile road from North Avenue to Card Road. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Drollet moves.
So moved.
I think that was a motion by Drollet, supported by, I think, Ha. Was it Ha? Okay.
That was correct.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any speakers. Please vote.
That motion passes 10-0.
I got confused because I have A, B, D, and then C, so I went to C. But so the next one is waived by Internal Services Chair. That is the full board approval requested for the Macomb County Food Program Outdoor Walk-in freezer additions. I know we already discussed this. I believe Lynn is not available today. Is there a motion?
So moved, Kraft.
Moved by Kraft.
Support Romano.
Support by Romano. So let me just, okay, I don't see any speakers. Please vote.
That motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. So that's all the business. New business. Does anyone have any new business? Let's see. Oh, still on the other thing. Anyone have any new business? Seeing none, we'll close new business and go on to public participation. 5 minutes. Does anyone wish to be heard? If you're on phones, hit *6. Does anyone wish to be heard? It looks like, do we have somebody that's asking to speak? Is it Patty or Mike?
Yes, hi.
Maya was asking to speak.
Right, go ahead, Mike, and state your name and address. Okay, who is that? Mike, can we mute who it is?
Yep, Commissioner Kleinfeld, Patty, I think, just took care of it, and I think that we should be ready to go.
Thank you. I apologize for that, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is Mai Xiong, and I live at 29444 Malvina Drive, 48088. I have a clothing store in Warren, and 3 of my children attend Warren Consolidated Schools. As you may know, yesterday, the MDHSS issued a statewide order mandating face masks. But prior to that, from Friday through Sunday, the residents of Macomb County were confused and disappointed in the lack of collective leadership on the county level. In regards to Mark Hackle, who was quoted in the Macomb Daily on Sunday, October 4th, and I quote, "It's disconcerting to see one person making decisions." And again, I quote, "You don't do something unless the legislature approves it through creation of law." Meanwhile, Mr. Hackle has been making his own reckless decisions without first consulting the county's legislative branch, the Board of Commissioners. By saying that he was not going to enforce a mask mandate in our county, while Oakland County's executive was very quick to continue enforcing this very simple and basic measure to protect the public health and safety of its residents. Many residents here have voiced their concerns, saying that they were no longer going to shop in Macomb County and would gladly take their business to Oakland County. As of yesterday, when I started an online petition on change.org, prior to the MDHSS order, we garnered over 250 signatures, and counting to support the importance of wearing a face mask and requesting that the county respect this guidance. It is the county executive and the board of commissioners, along with the county health department and all officials' jobs to protect the public health and safety of its residents. And as of 2018, the census regarding the age demographics, roughly 23% of residents in Macomb County are over the age of 60 or older, in the range considered most vulnerable for severe illness, death, or resulting from COVID-19. And that this age group is the fastest growing in our county. So this percentage is not accurate as of today. But it also does not include the people of any age who have serious and underlying medical conditions and might be at higher risk due to pre-existing conditions. In addition, Macomb County is responsible for the over 200 plus senior citizens living in the Martha T. Berry long-term care facility, not including any other publicly managed facilities, and the hundreds of medical workers and caregivers who work to care for our seniors every day. It is so irresponsible of the county executive to disregard this very simple, basic act of wearing a mask in order to protect those most at risk and everyone around us. The residents of Macomb County believe in science, and our Governor Whitmer's prior and current guidance on wearing face masks in public spaces as a precaution, which has helped lower Michigan's rate of COVID-19 infections. She is our leader, and COVID-19 is a new virus where we need to take all precautions and listen to the science so that our businesses can open and our children can safely return to the classroom. Executive orders from the governor of our state must be enforced by all levels of government. It's so embarrassing as a resident and so unfortunate to have a lack of leadership on the county level and an executive who does not work with other leaders to solve our biggest problem, which is to slow the spread of this virus. This lack of leadership and belief in science is reflective of the fact that Macomb County has surpassed Detroit in confirmed cases. Our county saw the second most new cases yesterday behind Kent County. And on July 13, Hackel encouraged residents to not call the local police if they have a problem with people not wearing face masks. He is deliberately encouraging and condoning those who don't wear masks by saying that there will be no consequences. So my question to all of you is, who do we call now that MDHSS has reinstated the mask mandate, which is now punishable by law with a $1,000 fine? Who do we call to enforce this in our county? Because I know we can't call the executive or the sheriff's office because they won't.
You just have about 20 seconds left.
Okay. So please tell me, if COVID-19 is not a big deal for us to mandate masks, and why are the schools closed? Why are my children not allowed to go back into the classroom in Macomb County? Women and mothers bear the burden of this pandemic the most, and we have to sacrifice our career and our jobs in order to help our children learn online. How much longer are you going to do nothing about this? My children's education's future is on the line. If this is not enough for you,
I have to ask you to wrap it up. Thank you. I apologize. Go ahead.
No problem. I'm wrapping it up. So if this is not enough for you to require face masks, then I don't know what it is in order for us to get past this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to be heard?
I do.
Okay, go ahead. State your name.
James Andanoff. I live at 67896 Pinewood Lane in Richmond, Michigan.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm hoping one of the commissioners, I think I spoke to Mr. Brown, if he could call me back again or something. But my concern is I've been driving around Macomb, and before I get going, I completely agree with the last person that was just on. But anyhow, this has something to do with all of the billboards that popped up throughout the county that have the executive on them. How do we get that changed where no elected official can be on a billboard or a sign? And I'll give you an example as far as veterans, whatever we're doing for veterans. Why don't we put veterans on there? I saw another one with kids. Why don't we have some kids throughout the county put on the billboard and not the executive? I just think that there's something that needs to be done about that. And I hope someone can give me a call back and let me know if I need to proceed or if one of the committee or the commissioners can handle this for me. My phone number is 810-543-0670. My name is James Andanoff, and I'm looking forward to hearing from someone so I can get this done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Does anyone else wish to be heard? *6 if you're on the phone. All right, seeing none, I will close public participation. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Gillette moves to adjourn.
Moved by Gillette. Is there support?
Support from Kraft.
Support by Kraft. Okay, thank you. Please vote. And we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.